obvious. If there's one thing that defines this panel, I'm really excited, is this the Mavericks and the people who exhibit animal spirit. So thank you for exhibiting some of that. But that's not enough to build a great startup. That's not definitely enough to build a great company. What does it take really to build a great startup? Can be you know, $1 billion or $100 million question depending who you ask or who asks you. So you know, let us try and understand as part of this discussion from some great founders who are here who combine you know, real world understanding of business with the maverick and, you know, animal spirit that we are talking about, and try and learn from the experiential journeys and hopefully offer you some actionable insights at the end of this discussion. Let me start with Rohan. You know, why did you start up?
Can you hear me? Good. So it's an interesting question, the fundamental question, and I think the way I'd like to start that off and kick it off is first, thank you guys all for having us here. We're as excited to be here as you guys are to have us. And I think one of the things I was thinking about on the way here when I addressed the crowd is put myself in your shoes, because I was exactly there 6 years ago. So not long ago, I was doing the exact same thing in business school, getting my MBA, writing a business plan in my room, which I'm sure a lot of you are doing right now. And I said, how do I connect that, you know, with what you go through today, and how does that relate to what you're doing? And I think the biggest insight, and I'll talk about the business in a second, but the biggest insight is that business plan I made 6 years ago has no relevance to what I'm doing today. So just remember that no one has the answers. I didn't have it back then, I don't have it now, and maybe we'll figure something out in the future. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I wanted to sort of kick this off with to say is as you're writing that business plan, don't overthink it. I think the key for an entrepreneur, the animal spirit, is to do it. And I think that's one of the things I want to start off with. I heard some conversations earlier today, you know, I'll wait a few years, I'll work at McKinsey, or I'll work somewhere else. No, do it. So I'll kick that off by saying that business plan you have will never have the answers. It's you who has to do it to find the answers. And starting that journey, let me now talk about my story. So I know we don't have much time, so I'll talk about this really quick. But I had a finance background, and I actually came to India back in 2010 before I went to business school. And I did a hobby, passion-driven investment into an ice cream parlor called Hokey Pokey Ice Cream in Mumbai. Some of you may have heard of it. And back then, it was just a small little parlor that we had. We were the first to introduce a Cold Stone Creamery concept, and that was my exposure to India. Fast forward a little bit, you know, one of the worst businesses to be in. I hope none of you are in the ice cream business, but you know, especially the parlor business, it was a tough business. All we were doing was paying rent to the landlord. And while I was in business school, I came to India to look at shutting that parlor down, and also taking a course where I got inspired to do something. And that's where I built this little business plan to come and become what I actually wrote down, the ice cream king of India. And here I am now being coined the Dahi Prince. So that changed a little bit. I think the main thing for me was spending that time working on how do I build an FMCG business in ice cream. I mean, that's what the opportunity we identified. Without going into too much as to what the issues were, someone mentioned earlier about seasonality. I think what was the key thing for me was writing this plan out to see how big something like this could become. Do I want to move to India, you know, getting a nice degree that I paid for, which a lot of you are spending a lot of money for this degree you're getting right now. Do I really want to move to India and do this? And I think that's what dawned on me, and I think that's where that, I guess, animal spirit comes from, is that I said if I don't do it, I'll never know. I could write this business plan for years and years and years. And I think, so I moved here 5 years ago. We started off as the ice cream business. We took the parlor business and made it into an FMCG business. And then Epigamia was just an experiment for us to complement the business. And then this baby just took off. And I think that's sort of the story so far.
Amalik, let me come to you now. Of course, there's a lot of fascination with, you know, your classic e-commerce ventures and so on. You know, over years, there's a lot of obsession about such startups. But you picked to build something which people wouldn't normally associate with, you know, as you know, like the next big e-commerce kind of a venture, anything like that. I mean, there was a wave of e-commerce companies that took off in India, but you picked something like chai. And it's amazing the way, the journey so far. I mean, I definitely am a consumer. I'm sure a lot of them here are. Why did you pick that, and what went behind it? And what is your animal spirit, if there is one? You didn't jump.
I guess the animal spirit is all in my mind. But, so frankly, when we started, we were quite, we're pretty much the untouchables because I have a background in technology and everybody was trying to convince me that, what are you really, really trying to do? And thankfully, I did not listen to anyone. Just think of it. It's such a large market. I mean, as I like to remind my team all the time, we have 0.01% of the market share and we are the largest player. We just have to be 1% and our investors will be super happy.
That's for sure.
But the thing is, I mean, going back to B school and why did I start it? I think for the first time I became self-aware, and I mean it very, very honestly, while I was at B school. Otherwise, all my life I had been a very good boy, trying to, score the right marks, get the right job, and so on and so forth. And once I got to the school, that's the first time I really became courageous and started really evaluating what do I want to be. I was 27. I had been in Microsoft for 4.5, 5 years. I had done decently well, but I became self-aware. So if there's one takeaway from the talk here, all of you use this opportunity to be self-aware. Doesn't mean that all of you have to aim for entrepreneurship. Frankly, I mean, the idea has to come, the conviction has to come, so many things have to fall in place. Maybe you have to meet the right co-founder, maybe the right angel. So that doesn't really happen as Rohan possibly alluded to. It doesn't really happen as per a plan, right? So while you're in B school, just don't get caught into a kind of a race with each other. Try to be self-aware. If your race is taking to a job, fantastic. Ideally, try to pick up the job for learning. Don't try to do it just because everybody says that's the coolest thing to do. Because sooner or later, the self-aware thing is going to hit you. It may hit you when you're 40, it may hit you when you're 50, but it will hit you. So if you can use this time of 2 years to arrive at that, it'll be great. And so that was my moment. I realized that technology is great, exciting. I love technology. Surprisingly, our company is doing a lot of work in technology. That's the part which is taking a lot of my time. Rohan knows I'm very passionate about it. But at that point of time, I reached the conclusion, which I still hold true, that brands outlive technology. Technology is an assist and not necessarily an end in the goal. So my moment of whatever self-aware moment was that I think building a brand is a great pursuit. And that somehow took me to chai. I evaluated other ideas. It was not even my original idea. Somebody mentioned chai. I said, yes, great, chai, such a big market. Nobody's paying attention to it. Looks great. Let's get after it. That's all.
No. Let's shift gear for just a minute and go to Vivek. Animal spirit is good, nice to start up with and do the things that both of you talked about, but it can only take you so far. Now, Vivek, you have had a long career with some of the most established FMCG and consumer companies. Now you are with Swiggy. We were talking before we got here about the teams and the talent, what it takes to grow or scale from one point to another. First of all, let me ask you this question. Why did you join Swiggy? You had things going quite.
Still does.
I wish my previous boss was as kind as you about. But on a serious note, every zoo needs an animal trainer, right? An animal tamer. So, I just wanted to actually say I'm so happy to be here. I was actually one of the earlier ones here because I'm living in Bangalore and I've got paranoid with the traffic. So I came here early and I met this amazing guy called Angad who's busy looking at his phone. But the one thing which he did was I bugged him enough to say, listen, I don't want to be in a shirt, so give me a t-shirt. So he gave me an ISB t-shirt. So the little bit I can do to understand, it took me for a round and all that. I've enjoyed it. But I'll tell you the most amazing welcome I got in ISB. The dessert today at lunch was a gulab jamun. Right? So if those of you who saw the last IPL campaign, the gulab jamun ad was the absolute winner. The requests for gulab jamun went up 100 times on the platform just because of that ad.
Wow.
Obviously, we didn't have enough gulab jamuns to service them. So it created a separate problem. But it's been, so for me, why I joined maybe gulab jamun, but on a serious note.
Now we know what it takes to
Yes, but on a serious note, I think I think Harsha decided that we need some kind of animal spirit taming, and he seemed to be doing well in Africa. There seems to be lots of animal spirits there. So let's bring him back in and join. No, on a serious note, I mean, I was just telling one of the professors, in fact, I was speaking to Uday, who's part of your team, that in every 5 years or so, I would kind of assess and say, look, PNG is offering me the next, let's call it round of graduation, new set of skills, new set of kind of challenges, different country often. And there's a good challenge out there. It could be a startup, it could be another company, etc. I would actually officially go through a proper round of writing down a document that says, this is what PNG is going to give me if I stay, this is what I could get if I go for this particular company, not from an outside-in perspective, but by actually speaking to the CEOs, getting the job offer and all of that. And then at some stages, if it was a 50-50 call, I would stay with the known. It's only when it starts tipping beyond the 60-40, 70-30 that you kind of say, okay, now it looks like it's a good idea to shift. So that's really the answer to the question you asked. But in terms of scaling, I think I was just looking. 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, the whole of the country used to do about 3,000 orders per day for Swiggy. Today, Gachibowli, by the time I finished the speech, Gachibowli would have done 3,000 orders. Right? And that is crazy when in fact the poor Ds are going around campus trying to figure out what is the right way to reach the students here, right? So I spoke to this Ds yesterday and said I'm going to ISB, and there was this stunned silence in the room yesterday amongst the people who handle Gachibowli. Why are you going there? Like, because there's ISB. They said, sir, आप बात कर सकते हो प्रोफेसर से? किस चीज़ के बारे में? वो ट्रैफिक रूल है ना जो. So apparently, the traffic rules are so strict here that if they earn X, if they take the wrong turn, they end up paying 3x in challans and fines. Right? So like, sir, it's a very complex equation for us on how we will make our earnings. बाकी जगह पे तो simple है, X deliveries times Y rupees. We know our earnings. यहाँ पे बहुत complex है. Left turn लिया तो 10 रुपए जाएगा, right turn लिया तो 20 रुपए जाएगा. So, no, but on a serious note, they said that it's great fun. We actually do a lot of orders here, so thank you for eating. But on a serious note, it's an amazing company that's actually on an amazing journey of already having scaled. And I think that the wisdom of the founders is to bring in people who run companies that actually deal with 10, 100 times the population that Swiggy is dealing with today. So obviously what works for 10 million people is not going to work for 100 million people, and definitely not going to work for 1 billion people. And I think the people like Harsha, Nandan, etc. have that vision. I think the investors who actually deal with Swiggy have that vision. I got the most amazingly consistent view of why I need to be hired from like 15 people. That included all the founders, all the investors, and all my direct reports. In fact, the interview process was a bit weird. I was being interviewed in my direct reports. Wow. So I was like, okay, this is a funny one, right? If they grill me too much and I happen to make it, they're in trouble. But on a serious note, it was an amazing interview process, very consistent, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm there.
Great. I think what the points you make, Vivek, are very important, going back to what Amalik was mentioning. I mean, not everybody has got to become an entrepreneur, right? It also makes sense sometimes to become part of a great founding team and take them through the journey that he just talked about. Anjana, let me come to you now. We've talked enough of the animal spirit. Clearly, when you have a check to write, I'm not sure how much you look at the animal spirit as such, but can you take us, we have listened to entrepreneurs or founding team members from why did they start and things like that. What is your story? When someone comes and pitches to you, what do you look for? And if you are not getting what you're looking for, do you always say no, or to take us through that, because I'm not sure how many of the pitches you are going to get today, but help us see through your lens.
Sure. First of all, thank you for not asking about my animal spirit and hopping off or onto this stage. I'm sure all the ladies in the room wearing high heels will appreciate I didn't do that. I think in terms of what we look for, look, it's a tough question for us, and we keep asking ourselves this. And to tell you how tough it is, we don't have any of these wonderful companies in our portfolio. So I think it is it's not as straightforward as it seems. But one of the things that we look for early on when we back founders and founding teams is actually the ambition that they show very early on. And we don't always get it right, but it's a very important thing for us to know that what the team is trying to build is actually something very aspirational. They may fall, they may fail, but at least the goal is big. That's something that most investors look for. The reason I say this is we often find folks who are okay with a small plan, and it's not to say that that's a bad business. Often that's a good business. But then it doesn't make good business sense for investors like us to come in. So I think it's important to know as a founder or as an investor whether this is something that makes sense to go and raise venture capital or private equity for. Just from a sense of your own ambition and your expectation on what sort of scale you want to build in the company. Now, when we look at businesses, we are looking at market potential. Now, this is very easy to say. I can give you a long list of instances where we've been wrong, but I think there are some cases where it's a little bit more obvious, where the market may be unorganized, you're organizing it, you have a unique product in sight, because of which you have a special angle to play. In some cases, the demand doesn't exist. I mean, there are situations where we have said market size is too small, and some of these are very large companies today. One of the other things we look for is actually the credibility of the founding team. And this is also a function of the type of business you're in. I think in consumer internet businesses, that credibility comes from having the right product insight and being the person who knows more about that customer than anybody else. Now, I can give you one story in this regard, right? When Ritesh Agarwal had come to do his Series A pitch, he was young. He was younger than probably all of us in this room. And everybody was looking at him saying, he's a kid. What does he know? He hasn't finished like college. Has he actually thought about this? But he had made the effort to go to multiple hotels, had felt the pain himself, and had actually come with a very clear reason for why he believed this would succeed. Now, this is in the case of a consumer internet business, where you've sort of felt the consumer's pain, and therefore you have an insight because of which you believe the market could be very large. In the case of a completely different type of business, say it's enterprise SaaS or it's healthcare, these are businesses where you need a little bit more credibility coming from experience. So more often than not, the entrepreneurs you'll find in these spaces may be a little bit older, would have worked at several companies where they've identified the pain points that you find in healthcare or you find in a large enterprise, because of which you have a unique insight and an ability to be able to go and crack open a particular product market use case. So I think that's what I mean by credibility. And look, I think the animal spirit is very important. I think it's a function of being able to build that dream, having that dream which I talked about earlier on, but also really wanting to get there. And we really, really value that in entrepreneurs. We see that in the hustle that they have, in the speed at which they move. And I'd like to link this back to what Amulik said some time back as well. I think in addition to having a large market, having the credibility, it's also important to know what you're good at and what you are not good at. And at the right time, bringing in the right capability of team. There are situations where, very early on, probably even before an investment, we sit down with the founders and have a conversation saying, hey, what do you think about yourself and your team? And we often worry when people, especially early on, say, hey, we are the team and we've got all bases covered, because the answer to that is always no, right? And it's better to say, look, I'm damn good at A, B, and C, but I know that my team is a little bit weaker on finance or operations or what have you, right? In some cases you may have that covered, in some cases you don't have marketing covered, whatever it is. But I think it's important to have that self-awareness and recognize that when it comes to building the right quality of team around you. I think these are some of the things that we look for. I think things change depending on the stage of the company, the capital requirement and so on, but I can go on for the whole day, so let's come back.
No, and good to know that you have your own learnings in that. There's no fixed template as such. Like if it were that easy.
Absolutely, and to your point, you said, does a no mean no? I think a no never means a no permanently. I think there are several situations that we have where when a company has approached us for a Series A, we have passed, and for a variety of reasons, right? We may not have been believers, the story may have changed and so on, but there are situations where we've gone back and invested in subsequent rounds.
Sure. So let's talk situations. we talked about having a business plan or not having one, and having the passion and hunger to build a great brand. So we want to set aside 15 minutes and extend this panel and make you all part of it for questions. So final round of quick insights. Let me start with you, Rohan. What happens when things go wrong? Can you quickly share something to illustrate that and also share a key learning there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so when you say what happens when things go wrong every single day. So that's the daily job, is addressing the things that are going wrong. But no, I think the idea is, as entrepreneurs, who have the animal spirit, we take a lot of, we do a lot of experiments. Experiments on everything, experiments on hiring, experiments on product development, experiments on distribution strategy, whatever that may be. And I'll give some specific examples as well. I think what's important for us is not to shy away from making that experiment and taking the risk of doing it, but then quickly learning from it and moving on. I know that sounds sort of very high level, but just a simple example. So I'm assuming some of you have had our yogurt. It goes in a cold chain. It has to be carried chilled, and if it's not kept in that cold chain, it gets spoiled really fast. And when we started off with Epigamia, we were going through distributors. We were using third-party distributors who frankly didn't have the capability to even manage this product themselves. And it didn't stop us from working and getting the product out there and getting the brand out there, but we said, we may have to do this ourselves. And there weren't many precedents for it. There's only one or two maybe even today. And it was a big risk against a lot of debate internally, but we decided to do it. We decided to do a direct distribution. And it was a very painful few months, absolutely no sleep whatsoever. And, but we figured it out. I mean, we got there. And I think the challenge was in the beginning when we went with distributors, being a small brand, nobody knows, nobody's heard of. The dukaan wala says, "Ye kya hai? Kyun kharidun? Kaun kharidega?" Those are some real challenges, right? Those are some real problems. And the ability to actually have those conversations with dukaan walas, convince them why, convince them that the public is going to be looking for this. We believe we have an insight that we want to act on. These are things that I think there's experiments that we took. And I think my biggest takeaway is take those experiments, learn from them, and move fast. I think that's where the animal spirit will come in, is rather than overthink it or not take it at all, just sort of test it and then keep retesting. I think that's what as entrepreneurs, we need to throw darts. We just need to make sure we're not throwing it all over the place. It needs to be some confined area that we're throwing it towards. And I think that would be my bit on that.
Amelie, coming to you, anything that you can handpick from your entrepreneurial journey and use it to illustrate what happens when things go wrong?
So I think, mistakes will happen. The toughest part of an entrepreneur's journey is to stomach all the mistakes, because there are small ones and there are big ones, right? But they're going to happen. The journey is so long. What I've learned is that it's good for you. You can't necessarily time it, but it's good for you if the big ones, the big mistakes happen early on, right? The conceptual ones. Are you after the right market? Is your positioning right? Have you pitched the product with the right, perception around it? All these are big ones, right? So to have all these mistakes uncovered early on is fortunate. I think there is a bit of a role also that a founding company or essentially the founding team has, and that is to be transparent at least in our experience, what we have realized is that even when you are in a relatively early stage, let's say angel or even series A, it is very helpful if you are super transparent and engaging with your board with a full level of trust, rather than thinking, hey, they are watchdogs or they are overseers. It's just best to engage fully transparent, because at those early stages, every entrepreneur doesn't necessarily come with that kind of a hindsight to figure out that that's a big problem to solve, or that's a, that's a big area to address right itself at this juncture, right? So for us, to quickly give examples, number one, when we started, the notion was to build a sort of bottom of the pyramid mass market brand, right? And the initial amount of money, essentially a lot of my own money, went in building 8-9 stores, and the whole construct in my mind was very, bless his soul, CRRR, then sort of bottom of the pyramid, which I realized very quickly on is completely wrong one. So I went back to all the angels and I said, okay, I've lost all my money and possibly also, dropped a big chunk of your money down the drain, but I think we need to do a reset, right? And it was very well appreciated by all of those guys. They actually doubled up. They said, great, right time to, sort of acknowledge this. So what's the learning, and of course there was a lot of double clicking and triple clicking, but that helped, Had we sort of lived with it, not been transparent about it, with all those senior people that I had as angels and board members even then we would have been in a very different situation. There's just one example to give you, and there are lots more that happen over the course of time.
Good one, actually. Vivek, just to take your insights on this one, a lot of large organizations or so-called incumbents are also trying to exhibit animal spirit. I mean, it's a trend now. It's not just fashionable, it's actually happening. So, in your experience, can you touch upon this whole thing of failing, of failures? Any key learnings there from your side?
So, experiences from my previous role or here?
It's what? How long have you been here?
In 2 months, we made a lot of mistakes. Like, for example, one of the things I was going to say, hope and pray that the question and answer session that we had, I hope there's not a single person who's going to basically say, where's my order? Because that is something which we make mistakes all the time, right? We tried to do, batching of orders so that it can be actually a lower cost for the consumer, and it often leads to a mistake because then the consumer is saying, where's my order? Why is the guy going in the opposite direction? So mistakes in this company are happening all the time. The good news is the piece around what Rohan mentioned, which is can't be a mistake on a canvas that is 100 by 100. It has to be a kind of a zone where you're making mistakes, and you must have the ability to quickly pick up what's going wrong and then and kind of correct from it. But honestly, I think in the larger companies as well, the ones that do actually well are actually running hundreds and hundreds of A/B experiments, right? And they're just hidden under a large umbrella called the company. I mean, so the previous company I worked for sent me to open up the business in Ethiopia. The P&G is in, call it 180 countries. There are not that many countries left in the United Nations for P&G to be in. So there was like North Korea and Iraq and Cuba, which is the only places that P&G was not in, and Ethiopia because of the history of them coming from political history. So when they opened it up, it's a nation of 100 million people. It's the second biggest country in Africa and has never been colonized, so has its own culture, has its own language. And they said, go open it up. So for the first 6 months, we didn't have an office. We didn't have any employees. And there were just 6 of us handpicked to go there, fly there every kind of, synchronize and fly there, getting the visas on the same time for 5 different people, flying in, sitting in coffee shops and figuring out what to do. There's no data on what's the distribution numbers, what are the store numbers, which is the media company, which is the, which celebrity is popular, who do we use? Nothing was known, right? So which brand should we bring in there? There's 100 brands in P&G's is kind of, portfolio. What brands are the best ones to bring in there? So there was a fair bit of, I mean, I don't see how that was different because all we were doing was, the only advantage was that somebody was paying our salary, right? And I know the founders here would say that, I mean, when you actually have no paycheck, then it drives a very different type of behavior. I totally buy that. I mean, hunger drives very different behavior. But I think As we know, we are the hunger saviors, right? So I can never stop.
The food
ever since I
references.
heard that our market share on this campus fell from 80 down to 50, it's just been on my mind over the last 20, right? But coming back, we actually did a lot of what I call grounds up hacking and made hundreds of mistakes there. The good thing was that we had a fear of actually saying failure means that we've just wasted 2 years in a company where 2 years counts because we've just fallen back in the race. We've maybe just burnt $100 million and kind of, that's a serious amount of money to burn in any company. But the good thing was there was enough latitude given that says these are your guardrails. The guardrails were as broad as don't break the law and stuff like that, which you don't. And within those guardrails, we were allowed to make mistakes, any kind of mistakes. Imagine somebody tells you don't break the law, other than that there's no guardrail. That's very, very open in terms of the remit. And I think good companies are learning and trying and having entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So that's why they're kind of thriving.
Anjana, final insights from you, because you would have seen these from board seat to a potential or existing investor. What have you learned?
So I think all of them have talked a little bit about experiments and failing fast and moving on, so I won't repeat that. There are a couple of things I find that companies struggle with over time, and this is less when we invest versus more when we're in partnership with businesses and see them evolving. The biggest issue I find in companies that get well funded is that they lose focus. I think it's very easy to let a lot of moderate experiments keep going. I think there are the very successful ones, there are the god-awful ones. Those two are as clear as night and day, but that gray zone in the middle is actually very large. So to say that, look, this is my 9th best-selling product, like should I keep it alive or not? Actually, it's giving me so many crores of sales. Should I keep it? Should I not keep it? That's a tough decision, right? Or to say that, look, I'm on the board of a school company. We had a low-cost chain of schools and we had a set of international schools, and both were equally big at a point. And we had to pull the plug on the low-cost business, which was bigger, because we said, look, this is not going to go very far. It was a tough decision. And to do that, it takes a lot of fortitude to say, I'll give this up because it's a little bit your baby and you don't want to let it go. So I would say that having that brutal focus is very important, because otherwise it's very easy to say, I'll do this also, I'll do this also, I'll do this also. I think that's one. I think the second very important thing is not being able to hire and retain good quality talent. Over time, we have seen that as a company scales, the only answer is to surround yourselves with really high quality caliber. Many founders struggle with this because there is a founder, there are often early members of the team who may not scale with the company. So you do need to bring in the right level of talent in between. If you don't give people enough room, they will not grow, they will not thrive. And we've seen so many situations where people have not been given the room, have not fit in, and have sort of been, ejected by the body, if you will. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work beyond a point. So if I were to say what I have seen over the last 7-8 years at Sequoia, these are probably the two biggest reasons for failure across several high potential companies.
Thank you.
Pankaj, if I may,
Sure.
I think the point which Anjana made is crucial, and it's easy to do because passion, animal spirit, and love for the brand and the baby that they've created is what makes founders successful. You can't do this with just left brain logic, right? And to imagine to say that you have to now kind of not spend time in meetings that you were part of is not easy. So I'll give you an example of a real story that's actually happened just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Harsha had a bunch of meetings, right? He's a founder CEO, right? So he's told his assistant to sit with mine and basically marked out a whole bunch of meetings, 50 of them across a week, that he's basically said, replace my name with Vivek and pull me out of the meeting list. So literally, we'll imagine going and doing that line by line. Yeah. So that's kind of a visible sign that he's basically saying, look, I'm not even in the room, so there's no point talking to me. Because if you do it in a sort of organic sort of a way, humans are so used to talking to people, people are used to having the connections, that unless you do some kind of a visible signage of that, it becomes often hard to evolve to it. You've got to kind of find a way to step jump towards it. And I think that there's a certain method to the madness that at least me and my CEO founder are going about. So I'd just like to say that there's a huge merit in what Anjana is saying, and it has to be operationalized in a way that is visible.
Very good example.
I think the founder's mentality. Let me now invite each one of you to become part of this panel, and please shoot any questions you have for any one of us, and also be specific, make it one-liner and ask questions.
So the questions have been sent in to us by scanning of the QR code. I am going to read out the names of our question seekers. The first person is Mr. Tanmay Purohit. Tanmay, if you could raise your hand.
Hi, good afternoon. We have one company here who's making gold yogurt, one company who's making hot chai, one company who's delivering these. Do you think there's a lot of potential with respect to food technology, with respect to last mile deliveries? If yes, what is the potential? Like, how can we, as business students, make use of it?
I think we should get
Opportunity
maybe
on the last mile delivery side.
Yes,
And how can you
food technology.
Food technology, especially food technology.
So,
you want to take?
I was gonna.
I was just going to say join Swiggy, but that's not a good answer.
I was waiting for that answer.
I'm sure there's more to it.
And I was going to say, because of Swiggy, you will find it hard to raise money.
But Amlik, on a more serious note, anything you see as an opportunity that anyone can explore?
See, if you by delivery, you mean the classic delivery in the sense that there are delivery guys and they're coming in. Possibly, I would say no. If you want to be a company that wants to build a software which can allow drones to deliver in the next 5 to 7 years, I'm sure Swiggy will come and show a lot of interest in you. If you want to invest in areas which relate to vending, very intelligent vending, hot meal vending, that's an area again Swiggy will show a lot of interest in you. So, so fundamentally we are in the world of accessibility and convenience, and Swiggy is the largest player. Great to be your spokesman for this question. But they're definitely amongst the largest, along with some of the other players, of course, right? Just to be politically correct. And but the fact is that that space is so wide, and the technology part of the classic delivery being enabled in an automated fashion or being near within arm's reach of you is a big one. That's a big one for us, Boxy. It's a huge one for us, right? So if you mean that, then huge. If you just mean yes, you'll also create your own fleet.
Yeah, I think
no.
it's not so much so about food tech, which is a word that I think makes some of us cringe a little bit. But I think it's about distribution, right? What are the different distribution models? So I think if we remove ourselves from tech's just an enabler. I think the reality is what are the innovative distribution models that can come up? Obviously, again, Swiggy is at the forefront of it today, but is there something else out there, drones, whatever it may be, where Swiggy will deliver our yogurt in 45 minutes. If you can get it there in 15 minutes, we'll come to you. So what else is out there? I think that's really the fundamental question.
Next question.
Before we move on to the next question, ladies and gentlemen, the ILS Best Question Contest is on. Show some animal spirit, send some more questions to us. Our next question is from Mr. Shobhit Jain. Shobhit?
There were drones to deliver the
Mike.
Good afternoon. I have a very specific question for Mr. Amulik relating to Chai Point. I wanted to understand the thought process in terms of transitioning to a focus on AI and IoT and building something like the Shark platform, which you guys have done. And also if there are any future plans in terms of licensing the Shark platform to other third parties or other organizations that are in the same business as you.
Okay. So fundamentally, what are we really trying to do? We are trying to build a tea platform. As I said, we are huge believers in accessibility and convenience around the beverage. Imagine if there were 4 boxies here and somehow the session could go on without any of you disrupting it. I'm sure 20, 30, if not 50, 70% of you would be opting for a cup of chai and sip it through and watch that session. We recognize that, and we realize that in order to solve that, technology has a very important role to play. Accessibility and convenience essentially means that we need to have multiple channels to reach out to customers, stores for walk-in, delivery, boxy, right, and vending or in different forms and shapes. Now the problem is that when you have multiple channels and fundamentally we are giving a very tangible product, you need to have a technology platform to hold it all together, to manage it all together. The supply chain is common. At the end of the day, it's tea leaves, water, and milk, right, for the basic cup of chai. Now, that necessitated for us the path of Shark, which is very important for us now. We can't think of scaling without it. Does the technology have relevance for a lot of other players? And is that a thought in our mind? Candidly, yes. But focus is important for us. For now, just making the channels successful on their own independent basis is super critical. While we continue to innovate and go like crazy behind Shark. AI, facial recognition, these are all things which frankly we have done without necessarily spending a lot of development cycles. It's just a thought process of how technology is entering into stores and how the technology is entering into boxy/vending dispensing. We are just very alive to it as a company because that's our core. And hence it seems as if these are path-breaking things, but we candidly don't really think of them as super path-breaking. It's just helping us to enable convenience and accessibility.
Next question.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Path Gupta. Path? And the question following is from Ms. Radhika Goel.
Am I audible? Yeah. So my question was for Rohan. It's quite surprising that a product which almost everybody's been already exposed to was done in such a new way. Why do you think could the HULs of the world not do what you're doing earlier?
So I'll start that off by saying it's the same thing with, can you guys hear me?
It's okay, you're okay.
Yeah, I'm okay, all right. I think it's the same question that everyone says is, at least 5 years ago, every tech company, why can't Google do it? So I think that's the same fundamental question. I think the reality is, it's not that they can't do it. I think, like I said, for them, this would probably be more of the A/B experiment and something that's happening within. With us, we have a dedicated team that believes in this being a bigger mission than anything else. And I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, there was an insight that we had when we built the business plan that there's an audience out here that exists that grew up eating a product, but don't find it to relate to them anymore. Given the current day trends, given the sort of way health lifestyles are defined. And I think we just sort of looked at capitalizing on that a little bit. It helped that we had a little global view of what's happening around the world. And I think that's fundamentally what it comes down to. The other thing is that being a small organization, being a startup, as we've talked about earlier and earlier, we can move fast, we can fail fast, a lot in a lot different way than the big guys can. Now, having said that, the big guys have introduced products that compete with us. So it's not that they haven't, it's happened. And for us, that's been a great thing because it's helped build a category. And I think the final view that I have is, I think given where we are in our journey at a very, very early inception phase, and given how large we think the market is, having even more entrants is a good thing for us. It actually helps people look at this product, which one of my board members calls selling an ice to an Eskimo, which is essentially selling Greek yogurt, which is a low sugar form of Srikhand. I think it just helps build awareness around this being available in different occasions. It's not just something you have at a festival. It's something you can have after going to the gym. the whole sort of target marketing, positioning 101. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's sort of my take on it.
I think it does. Next question.
Our one last question is from Ms. Radhika Goel.
Hello. Hi, thanks for sharing everything. We're really appreciating all your insights. I cannot count the number of times I've had an idea only to realize it's already been done before, or somebody's already doing it now and it's too late for me to start. So I was wondering how you handle or anticipate this competition and how you face it and overcome it and come out on top. If there are any specific examples, I would really appreciate them.
It's an important question.
Yeah. I'll start off with that. So I think Malik and I were just chatting earlier, and I'll let him talk after me because I'm stealing his thunder a little bit here. But I think one of the things we as CEOs and founders of these companies do, not one of the things, I think the majority of our time actually just goes into product development, product management. And I think when we talk about things of a consumer brand, consumer insight, which is what we think we bring to the table, at least at a ground level or grassroots level, iterating on that consumer insight is very important. Keeping that connect with the consumer and spending time on the product is absolutely essential to success there. And I know we personally do it. We do it all the time. I spend probably 70% of my time on that front. I have a chef who's a co-founder, so it helps that, because I'm not the best in the kitchen, but he's fantastic. But at least to sort of match what we're hearing in the market and doing that. And it ties back to my question of experiments. We spend a lot of time. We don't go to sleep thinking what is competition going to do. That's not really something we stress too much about. But we want to make sure we're the first to be there before they do. And that's what's more important to us, because if we're going to be this cutting edge company that we believe we are, then we should be the ones to bring these products to the market first. I think that's what fuels us more than anything else. I'll tee it off to you.
Actually, I would just like to add to that. I have a slightly different point of view. Of course, there's a lot of value in being the first one there, but I would say that you should peel the onion a little bit on what is actually in the market. From a distance, it may seem like somebody else is anyway doing it. That's not always true. And if you put yourself out there as a consumer for that product, there will be gaps that you perceive. And that's how you can build something that's differentiated. But sitting far away, you may think that it's exactly the same.
Yeah, so Rohan and I were talking about product management. I think that's one of it's a huge area which goes, to the best of my knowledge, relatively unaddressed in B schools, in your environment. I'd love to know if if this scenario is different here. Sorry?
There are some profs here.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I mean it in a good way. Because product management is the single most important thing, I think, for any new venture. Ultimately, it's about a new service or a new tangible offering. How do you go about it systematically? And to Radhika, what you're mentioning is essentially a sign that the market is getting super competitive. People are able to conceptualize ideas, and the ones that are going to be successful are the ones where the product management approach is really well defined and is really well thought through. That's the point that you brought in, essentially, right? So, so please look at product management from a holistic perspective. I'm just trying to address your specific quandary, right? That if you see too many ideas, right, don't just go by the headline in the newspaper, oh my God, this idea is also taken, let's move on to the next, right? Every such instance deserves a double click, right? What is your view? Are you thinking 3 years, 7 years ahead, right? Or is your scenario only just for the immediate future? That's very, very important for any product, by the way, right? And if you start thinking of a product from a 1 year, 2 year perspective only, I think that's very scary, from a business perspective, and I would venture to say even from an investor perspective. But if you have a view which is 3, 5, maybe 7 if you're really, really great in that area, then I think you're on to something. And that's something which is so rare that you can safely assume that even if you find somebody has a similar thought, it's possibly worthwhile for you to do a double click and see whether it's really that well thought through. Or on that side, is it really well thought through at your end? And then take a call. The world is going to get competitive, right? People are going to be imagining whole lot of things. Execution, product conceptualization, these are going to be very, very tangible skill sets. For us in the company, for example, right now, that's where maximum amount of my time, I think, if I try to evaluate my time outside of meetings, which I'm overseeing as a CEO, where is my individual contributor role coming in? It's in product management arena, right? And if we are to be more successful, I need great product managers in the company. And I just don't mean from a software standpoint, just to clarify that also, because the tech industry to some extent is familiar with the notion of product management, especially well-organized companies. Startups, to the best of my knowledge, have done a very poor job because this is not really a well-ingrained discipline. But even in the tangible product side of F&B, apparels, textiles, take whatever, product management is super important. So I hope I kind of clarified some doubts.
Just, if I may, just add to that. And this is one of the things that I've learned over the last 8 weeks. Swiggy was definitely not the first mover in whatever space you define, food tech or food delivery or on-demand food delivery. It wasn't. And neither was Google the first search engine, nor was iPad or iPod the first MP3 player. So I went back, I used to teach in business schools when I mean right now I'm kind of, my CEO is keeping me busy, but in general, when I used to teach, I used to find that the first mover advantage being taught as an overwhelming superiority is a bit wrong. I mean, it's simply wrong. I know that's not how it's taught. It's taught in a far more nuanced sort of fashion. Most people take away the fact that first mover advantage is a killer advantage, in which case you're just looking for that unoccupied niche that nobody else has thought of. In most cases, the winners are actually people who have the better consumer understanding and a better understanding of the consumer pain points in a space that somebody has already gone into, but is just applying the right kind of focus and energy to resolve it faster, better, cheaper, than the other. And that's really what, for example, Swiggy has done. It wasn't the first mover in any of the spaces that it's entered into or is likely to enter into. The next few innovations of Swiggy are not going to be in spaces where other people don't exist.